Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Expertise is Overrated, the podcast that takes the time to answer the questions you didn't know you didn't want the answers to. I'm Sean.
And I'm Vib, and neither of us has any clue what we're talking about. Now, before we get to the episode, let's award the much vaunted Expertise is Overrated Tinfoil Award. Now, this week, Tinfoil goes to, you guessed it, Sean, for at one point suggesting he's going to try to turn me into a moral being, which is ludicrous in and of itself.
Clearly a failed crusade.
Very much so. But then 5 seconds later, he instantly agreed with Grindelwald, so I'm not really sure what we make of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've covered myself in glory.
I'm going to question your morals forevermore now.
I'm going to make you into a better person. By the way, have you heard about my theory on eugenics?
Have you heard the good word that Grindelwald praised for it?
It's not ideal.
It's ironic because, I somewhat agree with him to some extent. And if I had been a wizard back then, I would have probably joined him. But hey-ho, here we are.
So that's just horrific. That's not what I was meaning at all.
It sounded like that to me.
Might have the right idea, but is going about it all the wrong way. Anyway, that's for last week. This week, we're unpacking a very different and very difficult question. So we're looking at the Marvel Cinematic Universe and asking, how does Mjolnir work? That is Thor's hammer. Because, frankly, I'm confused.
Well, you're not the only one, to be honest. It's very confusing.
So I guess the problem statement that I want to put out there is, in the fandom, and apparently also in universe, the ability to lift Mjolnir is apparently somehow correlated or connected to some abstract notion of worth, which sort of doesn't make any sense and also is probably proven wrong by the films themselves. So what I want to do is just kind of ask, in that case, really, what is determining whether or not someone can lift Mjolnir? What do you think?
So you're taking issue with the statement, whosoever lifts this hammer will have the power of Thor?
No, so that's actually the central point of my case. I think that quote gets misinterpreted.
Right.
Because the quote specifically is, whosoever carries or bears this hammer, if he be worthy, shall have the power of Thor. Right?
Right.
But there's a couple of things wrapped up in that. Firstly, the implication is that you can lift the hammer and not be worthy.
Yeah, very much so.
But also we see... So it's just really, really complicated, and I want to try and unpick it, and I don't really know where to start. I almost wonder whether...
Okay, I mean, so you're quite right, because I think a lot of people misinterpret this quote. Myself probably included, because I never really stopped to think what that actually means, that phrasing, because I equally just assume, if you can pick up Mjolnir, that's very much how they portray it, right?
Yeah.
You pick up Mjolnir, then you are pretty much as badass as Thor.
Well, it's even more than that, because in... we're going to jump around the Marvel films quite a bit here. But in Endgame, when Thor... What a phrase this is about to be. When Thor goes back in time and is talking to his dead mum about how his life's fallen apart since his mum died, while a raccoon is stabbing his ex-girlfriend who's got an Infinity Stone inside her.
Yes. All of that happens, yes.
All of that happens and is not even the weirdest part of that film. He summons Mjolnir, right?
Yes.
And then says, I'm still worthy, as if the hammer itself has gauged him worthy. But he's not even holding the hammer at that point, and he also never lost the power of Thor. I don't understand.
Yes. So there's a few elements within the quote, right? There's part number 1, who can pick up the hammer? That's the sidebar, because quite clearly a lot of people, beings, etc., cannot pick up the hammer.
Sure, including people that you probably think can. Right, if we step back, if it's purely a question of strength, right, which
you mean it isn't.
Which it isn't because the Hulk can't.
Exactly, the Hulk can't pick it up.
Yeah, that's the answer there.
I mean, I've heard it said that Mjolnir is essentially the weight of a mountain. But clearly it isn't to people who, for some reason, the hammer deems. I don't want to use the word worthy because
No, but I know.
I think worthy is the second step of it all.
Yeah, so that you have to be able to pick up the hammer, and then you have to meet someone's definition of worth to get the power of Thor.
But the power of Thor in of itself is a very loose concept. What does that even mean?
It sort of depends which film you're watching, doesn't it?
It does and it doesn't. I mean, I guess at its most basic, you can say you can throw this hammer around the same way Thor does and leave it at that.
Sure.
And that's quite a powerful thing in and of itself. Because you can't become Thor, because Thor is the actual god of thunder regardless of the hammer.
Okay, so I want to touch on that for a second, because in the first Thor film, Odin strips Thor of his power. Or does he, I guess is the question. Right, when Odin casts Thor out of Asgard, chucks him down the Bifrost, remember?
Yes.
And then whispers the famous quote into the hammer.
Yes.
And then throws the hammer after him. And that's then the whole point of the first Thor film is Thor's hero's journey, quest for worth.
Yes, absolutely. But at that point, you could argue that, I mean, Odin, one presumes, knows how the hammer works and knows that hasn't really got anything to do with Thor's inherent power. I mean, he says as much in the later films.
Ragnarok, are you the god of hammers? Which is a great line.
Exactly. It was great. Absolutely fantastic line, yeah. So I think Odin is essentially giving him a sort of treasure hunt. Right? He knows the potential his son has. And I think he knows exactly how he can maximize that potential, how he can get Thor to being the best he can possibly be. And I think it starts off with sort of tying Thor's self-belief into the hammer, because obviously, he ends up having to sacrifice himself, which for some reason the hammer then really likes. And then when the minute Thor touches the hammer, he almost reincarnates.
Yeah. He's not worthy.
None of that has anything to do with worth, and I think I might even go one step further and say I don't think actually any of that has anything to do with the hammer itself. I think that's all Thor and internal thinkings that he has.
Yeah,
great sentence.
I don't understand. I'm sorry, I've co-opted this episode, which I'm sure we were going to talk about something much less noodly than this, but it's just been something that's burning away in the back of my mind for a while because I rewatched.
You've come seeking wisdom. I get it. It's fine.
It's a cry for help to our listeners, more than anything else. I rewatched Endgame a couple of weeks ago.
Great film.
Great film. When Cap picks up the hammer, and that's what really got me going on this, because when Cap picks up the hammer, Thor reacts as if that's almost a statement of Cap's worth. Right, because Cap can throw the hammer around and do all the Thor thing. We never see him fly, or I don't think we ever see him summon lightning.
But well, the hammer does at times when Cap is wielding it in Endgame, which I find a bit strange.
Does it? Yeah.
Yeah, because when he's like hitting Thanos, there's lightning every now and then. But
so maybe
there's a few things there, because I mean Thor is obviously in the vicinity.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're wrong in saying that Thor, as a result of Cap being able to pick up the hammer, assigns some level of worth to him. That's sort of, to me, that's like an Asgardian litmus test. It's like, you know what, this human is actually all right. He's got the right stuff. His heart is in the right place. He is a worthy individual. Purely because he can pick up Mjolnir. I don't think Mjolnir does anything other than convey that to Thor.
So you think that there is actually a worth test, or it's a terrible word, there is a test as to whether or not you can pick up the hammer? I
think so. I I don't
So
know
why?
necessarily what it is, because I mean, you have that scene in I want to say, is it Age of Ultron, right, where they all try to pick
Yeah,
up the
yeah,
hammer,
yeah.
right?
I was going to come on to that scene. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because famously Captain America does kind of pick it up.
Well, he
I've,
moves it.
I've even
The
seen some
hammer
people say that
shifts.
Cap knew he could pick up the hammer, and so decides to
Uh,
just not pick it up fully.
that
Enough
seems.
to just say to Thor, like, I can do this.
Stop being a dick.
I mean, it's also in that film, I think, where eventually Vision picks it up, isn't it?
It is, and
Just
there's a
casually.
few just casually just picks up. He doesn't realize what it's like because it's when Vision's newborn. He just sort of picks up the hammer and hands it to Thor, and that's why Thor's like, "Yeah, all right, we like this guy." But I don't. I guess maybe if we take a step back, who all? Well, I say asking the question. I've made a list of everyone who I think picks up the hammer or otherwise interacts with the hammer in a sort
Yeah.
of picking it up way throughout the MCU. Now, obviously, you've got Thor and Cap and Vision that we've talked about, and they all sort of vaguely make sense as probably pretty decent guys, although I'm going to throw a question mark around Vision. I have a slightly unkind thing to say about Vision as to why he can pick it up. But then you've got Odin, who we learn is an asshole. And then you've also got Hel, or Hela, who I'm not sure, like, definitely destroys the hammer while controlling its motion, which is sort of like holding it. And then I'm also going to throw Thanos in there, and I'm going to put a question mark around
Thanos.
So he doesn't pick up the hammer, but he like knocks it out of the way while it's flying, which is still more than we see anyone else capable of doing.
When does he do
in Endgame?
Yeah, it's really strange in Endgame, isn't it? Because he also wields Stormbreaker. I guess
So I was
we'll
then
come
going
on
to
to
come
that
on.
at some point, I think.
Yeah, no, Stormbreaker's on my list of things to talk about.
And he does block a dual wield Stormbreaker and Mjolnir somehow, as in, so you can clearly exert pressure on it.
Exactly.
But I don't know if that's necessarily the same as picking it up and wielding it. And you're right, though; it's more than we see anyone else do.
Yeah, and then the last person I'm going to throw out there is Eitri the dwarf, who makes it. Now, we never see him pick it up, but I mean,
and there's some argument. Okay, there's some argument to be made for Eitri being the smith, and so I think that's a special bond.
So it's distinct from wielding or bearing it. I can't remember the exact quote. I'm actually going to find the exact quote.
Potentially that, but also it's entirely possible that he just makes a hammer. I mean, a really, really fucking good hammer, but it doesn't become Mjolnir with some mystical power potentially until Odin does whatever Odin does. Odin can pick it up because he's the All Father, right? I think we have to just sort of accept that. And I think that's also the same reason that Hela can pick it up, because they're essentially just gods on such a high level.
But Loki can't.
Yeah, but he's not Asgardian.
I suppose he's not technically Asgardian, is he?
So of all the genuine Norse gods that we meet in the MCU, Odin, Thor, Hela, they can all handle the hammer in some way.
The quote is, "Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor," according to Goodreads.
Yeah, no, I understand the confusion. This is a really good topic to have brought up, but
Okay,
I'm just gonna give the game away here. I don't think we're going to get to a sensible answer.
No, I think the answer is the rules are different depending on the film.
Possibly. I mean, that's always going to be. I mean, as good as the MCU is in terms of continuity and whatnot, I think that's absolutely fair.
Yeah, slightly different creative direction.
It's gargantuan, isn't it?
Yeah. And we're not going anywhere near the comics here because they're just bizarre and all sorts of nonsense happens.
Yeah. But if we think, looking at that list of yours.
Yeah.
So obviously in the original Thor, right, he loses the power to wield the hammer. He can't pick it up.
Yes.
And actually at that moment, Thor is nothing more than a vanilla, if incredibly ripped human. Which is... But again, it's interesting because he obviously still is Thor, unless Odin has stripped him of that as well.
Well, this is the big question. One of the many big questions. When Thor is in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico, is he still Thor, or is it Donald Blake, whose clothes he wears and driving license he borrows?
And I think this is a really important point, though, right? Because we have to remember that Thor ends up there because he fucks up.
Yes.
And Odin needs him to get his head out of his ass and be Thor, the potential next king of Asgard. Right? Because he banishes Thor, and then he chucks the hammer?
So the scene
he chucks the hammer, then manages Thor.
No. He banishes. The scene is he essentially allegedly strips Thor of his power. So Thor's standing there in his armor, basically, and Odin tears his cape off him and then pulls his bits of his armor off. And as he does that, he says, "I take from you your power."
Yeah.
And cast you out, and throws him down the Bifrost.
Yeah, and then he whispers to the hammer, right?
And then he whispers to the hammer.
Right.
Sweet nothings.
So I think that's absolutely telling. Sweet nothings, yeah. Because
well, the only other thing the fact that Thor doesn't see him do it, I think agrees with you. The only other thing that I would wonder is whether it's all placebo. And Thor becomes worthy when Thor thinks he's worthy, because deep down,
absolutely, Thor needs to do something to himself in order to be worthy. Because I think he, in the end, realizes he has to self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Not that actually does anything, but he has to self-sacrifice because he thinks it's the right thing to do.
Not because he wants the hammer.
Exactly. It's not a selfish decision.
Yeah. At that point, he's not thinking about the hammer. The hammer comes separately.
And I think that's a massive realization for him. But more importantly, for the greater universe, I think that's exactly what Odin wanted. And ultimately, all of this is just a spell / test that Odin has set. And I think all he actually does in that film is strip Thor of his power, which he can do because he's the All-Father.
Yeah.
And then says, go on an adventure, find your self-worth, and then you can come back.
Go and have the definition of the hero's journey.
Exactly. And the way that Odin does that is by possibly employing the hammer, but essentially at that moment he locks Thor's power into the hammer because possibly that's the only way he can kind of do it. So you might end up in a really fucked up situation where someone else comes along at just the right moment.
Well, that was going to be my question, because Cap exists, right?
Yes.
So what happens if S.H.I.E.L.D. pull out Captain America and go, "Oi, Cap, can you move this hammer?"
Then I think Odin has a potential problem. I think he took a gamble, to be honest.
No, I think you're right. I think it's just quite a funny image.
It is, yeah. Cap just comes strolling into Asgard. It's like, oh, I'm king now.
So when Thor picks up the hammer in Thor 1 at the very end and then beats the shit out of the Destroyer, at that point, has Odin's spell gone away?
Yes, and I think after that, Mjolnir is just a very heavy hammer.
Okay.
Realistically.
That makes a lot of sense, except why can Cap then pick it up? Because it's not actually about weight, it's about worth, I guess, is the answer to that.
It's about worth. Yeah, maybe there's an element of overcoming the weight because you're going to utilize the hammer for the right reasons. Maybe.
So I'm going to be very irritating. Maybe the hammer has a metaphysical weight as well as a...
I think so, but it there's an element of judgment that it exercises, right? Because it's clearly... Yeah, because at the most basic, right? Thor can pick it up again when he sacrifices himself to save others.
Yeah.
Cap, very famously, does nothing but sacrifice himself to save others. Vision arguably also does the same thing, because he says, take the stone out of me, kill me, because we need to kill, what's his face, Thanos.
We need to stop Thanos,
Yeah. And then, as I said, the others are essentially all Asgardian high gods, so we'll put a pin in those. Now,
except for Eitri, who never holds the hammer.
Well, he certainly never wields it. I don't
never
think.
Wields the hammer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a really stupid question. If I put the hammer in a box, can I lift the box?
Yeah, I know. I've seen that question a few times. I suspect so.
I think so as well, because I think there's a
Because you're not actually
distinction.
holding the hammer, are you?
No, but it's a heavy box, I suspect. But I'm not wielding. I think wield is a better word than hold, but I'm not wielding the hammer.
Yeah,
so.
but even if you hold it in a box, you're not holding the hammer. You're holding the box.
No, exactly. But
And if you put the hammer in a lift, right, the lift is still
that
going
the
to go
lift
up.
works. Yeah, that's the classic. That's also why I think we're skipping around here. I think that's why Vision can hold it,
Maybe.
because he's just a machine. Like, he's a very clever machine, but
He's a mixture of everything, though, isn't he?
he doesn't have a soul, and souls are real in the MCU.
But are they real for every single being? Doesn't Asgardian have a soul? Same way that a human has a soul.
I assume so.
Same way that a Svartalf has a soul.
I guess so.
Because that's an interesting way of looking at it. But then, so the point that I was trying to get to is, obviously Iron Man, right? I've forgotten his name.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I keep thinking Robert Downey Jr., but that's obviously not the character's name. The fuck's his name? Stark. Tony Stark.
Could Tony Stark at the end of Endgame pick up the hammer?
You see, I don't think so. Because fundamentally, whilst he gives the ultimate sacrifice, and he is a superhero, and his heart, in many ways, is in the right place, he ultimately is still a bit of a dick.
No,
in a way that Steve Rogers just isn't. Like, Steve Rogers is the archetypal paragon of virtue.
No, he absolutely is. That's his point. He's a fixed point in time that the world moves around.
Except weirdly when it comes to Civil War, and he's the one objecting to oversight, which really seems like an odd.
No, but if you work through Cap's arguments in Civil War, they make sense in the context of Cap, because his argument is, I am the moral center. So I am the person who gets to dictate where my power is exercised.
Yeah, and I think that's the only way you can possibly look at that. As in, he's virtuous that, he has to decide what he does. Yeah, so, and maybe that's it. Maybe that's why Tony can't possibly wield the hammer, because he doesn't trust himself to make the right decisions.
Maybe.
So up until the end where he snaps, I think he's kind of in Thor's boots in Thor 1.
He is.
That's his entire arc, right? It's what he fights with throughout all his films, you know.
Just being an asshole.
Well, being an asshole, but then also when he recruits Peter Parker and he's really concerned, he just thinks, am I just, putting everyone's life in danger because I'm too fucking stupid or weak to sort it out myself?
Yeah.
And then at the very end, he does obviously sort it out himself. And maybe at that point, he could have picked up Mjolnir. I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. This. I get that it's a magic hammer, and that's sort of just the answer. But
well,
the way that it seems to be.
Why do you say that though? Before we move on, why do you think it's a magic hammer?
Well, it has to be, because otherwise, how else does it? Unless it's a really, 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 really heavy hammer. So this was going to be my potential answer. I don't think it works. But it's just a really heavy hammer, and Thor can pick it up because Thor's really strong, and Cap can pick it up because he's worthy and thus has the power of Thor and thus can pick it up.
But he doesn't have the power of Thor.
But he doesn't have the power of Thor, and he's not Thor strong when he's wielding the hammer. I think that's when he's so obviously weaker than Thanos when he's fighting Thanos with the hammer. He's quicker, essentially.
Yeah.
But he's not as strong as Thor, even when he's wielding the hammer. So
and ultimately none of them are as strong as the Hulk, who he said can't.
No. The only one who appears to potentially be stronger than the Hulk is Thanos. Then Thanos beats the shit out of the Hulk.
Yeah.
Which is quite funny.
But we also don't see Professor Hulk try to pick it up, right? Which we kind of have
to
say.
We do never see Professor Hulk try to pick it up.
Because he's most at peace with himself as a being, right?
Yeah.
So there's potentially something there. But it still doesn't necessarily mean that the hammer can't just be something that is made out of a particular kind of metal that for some reason just
the soul resonant metal.
Yeah, it's really dense and heavy for certain biological signatures it interacts with, as opposed to others. But then we have to ask the question: what makes Cap similar to Thor?
Unless it's a metal that can weigh the weight on your soul of your, for want of a better word, sins. So the heavier, essentially, the heavier the guilt that you're carrying.
Okay, no, guilt, I think that's a better word than the soul, because your soul is
maybe, yeah,
possibly some sort of constant, right? And you can obviously have done things in your life, or things can have happened to you in your life. You can feel guilt, you can feel remorse, and you can essentially not be at peace with your soul.
Yeah,
and that I think is what happens to Thor in the first film. It's what happens to the Hulk throughout until he becomes Professor Hulk.
That's the point of Professor Hulk.
Tony Stark. And that argument potentially kind of works, because I think Hela, for example, not a good person, I don't think anyone would say. Even I wouldn't go as far as saying she's a good person.
But she's quite clearly at peace with herself.
She's quite clearly at peace with herself. She does exactly what she's meant to do. Same with Odin. I mean, Odin's got lots of doubts, I think. But I suspect he's smart enough to sort of know how to fix it, or he's got plans to try and fix it. And he's obviously at peace at the end, because he just sort of disappears.
Yes.
Luke Skywalker style.
He does. He just sort of fades away. But no, then Odin becomes the problem, because unless in Thor 1 he hasn't had his own moment of introspection, so actually he's pretty at peace with himself. But he can't be at peace with himself because he's locked up Hela before then.
Yeah, I mean it's naff, but I think Odin being the All-Father.
Yeah, I think that is just
there's something there, right? Because
he's in charge of all Asgardian magic. He can do whatever he wants.
Exactly. It's a bit like, if we say Buddha can't do something, well, he obviously can, because he's there's no higher authority if you're a Buddhist. I think that's
sure. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I
what an example. Is this part of our desire to manage to get through a whole episode without referencing the Dresden Files?
And you just had to go and ruin it, didn't you?
We're not going to use it as an example.
Well, it's interesting to try and figure out if there's any other instances of some object like this. King Arthur's sword.
The sword and the stone, yeah.
Yeah. Like, is that a similar phenomenon where it somehow judges a person's soul? Or, well, I guess in that case it judges the sort of bloodline, potentially.
Well, that's a very good question. Does the sword and what is the sword and the stone judging?
I don't remember enough Arthurian legend to know what the inscription was there, or what the instructions were there. Is it a question of worth, or it's just something like he who can pick up the sword will be the true king?
Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king, born of England.
Yeah, so there's no mention of worth or anything there. It's just
it's a test of. You're right. It's a test of bloodline. Who's Uther's son? Is that test, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I guess the heir to the throne. Yeah.
Whoever.
Yeah, because we have to assume if Arthur dies for some reason, and then
it must go to someone else.
Someone else. Yeah.
But also, isn't that just Merlin playing silly buggers?
I know, but Merlin, Odin.
Yeah, no, fair.
It's not necessarily too dissimilar, I suppose. Maybe more obviously magic, I guess. But I don't know. I think that's where we have to kind of think about this, right? I don't think the power has the hammer, has any inherent powers other than it can't be picked up and wielded by
just
the majority of people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But maybe they retcon that halfway through, which is always a possibility, because Thor is very dependent on the hammer early on, and it's not until Ragnarok where he switches things up and is like, actually, you know what? I'm not.
Turns out I can punch lightning bolts.
Yeah, and then he upgrades to Stormbreaker, which is just absolutely ridiculous. A ridiculous upgrade, in my opinion.
But does Stormbreaker have any similar test? It doesn't. I don't.
It's not made clear, right? We haven't really seen enough of it.
But Thanos definitely wields Stormbreaker. He kills Thor with it.
He does. Yeah, he does. Does he actually hold it, or does he use his own sword to push it into?
Oh, does he? Dude, I can't remember. I just remember Thanos standing over Thor, driving, like pushing Stormbreaker's blade down into him. But I can't. No, you're right. I can't remember if he actually wields it.
But you know, what we do know about Stormbreaker is that the Thor can swing it, like throw it around the same way he can Mjolnir, and it comes back to him.
True.
And it seems to conduct his electricity very well. And it can also summon the Bifrost, which, I mean, that's pretty damn cool.
From where, one wonders.
From where, one wonders. But importantly, Stormbreaker has never been handled in any way, shape, or form by Odin.
No, that's very true. But,
so no element of worth has been applied to Stormbreaker other than what Eitri puts in.
Well, other than what Eitri puts in. And Groot picks up Stormbreaker.
Yeah. Well,
Groot he picks up the axe blade. Which there's just this quite funny question of sort of Eitri scrabbling around in his forge, going, "Where's the handle?
Where's the handle? Yeah. You must find the handle."
So didn't you have it ready?
No, I always think that as well. Like, come on, man. 101 smithing. Just get all the things in the right place.
Line up all the bits that you're going to need.
Actually, I've just remembered. Cap handles Stormbreaker.
Does he?
Yeah, because there's that scene where it cuts back to the middle of a fight, and Cap is wielding Stormbreaker. Thor has got. I'll take. You have the little one.
Yeah, they throw them between each other.
So there's that. So
but Cap can wield Mjolnir, so that doesn't.
Yeah, no, I know.
No, but it's just you're right though. You're right.
But I think Odin is the key differentiator in all of this. Because he ultimately is the person who whispers sweet nothings to the hammer. Or,
he is.
If that's a long-lived thing that actually changes the hammer itself, or if that's a test for Thor, I don't know.
No, I think I feel like your theory that it's a one-off test, essentially. It's I put all of the power into the hammer, and then the first worthy person who holds it is Thor. Will become Thor.
Yeah. And you do hope that he's kind of rigged the deck there, because...
You've got to think he's rigged the deck, right?
You know, Phil Coulson can't just rock up and pick up Mjolnir and is like, I'm a god now. Have fun.
Awkward.
It's good at
you've got to hope that Odin saw that coming.
I think he probably would have done, or at least Heimdall would have done.
Yeah.
Can he wield the hammer, I wonder?
He's got his sword, he doesn't need it.
That's true, actually.
But no, that's a fair that's a very fair challenge.
So I guess something to discuss is, what does Odin want to see in terms of worth? What does he think would make a worthy person?
Well, this is
for example, does he see Loki ever being able to being in a position where he could be a worthy king?
This is the sort of the last bit on my sheet, really, because like we learn in Ragnarok that Odin is a bad guy, or he was. Like, yeah, all right, he had a midlife crisis and got over his warring ways, but like Odin's definition of worth might not actually be that like what we would agree as worthy.
But it's arguably the same story arc that he went through, right? So he could have transplanted literally that.
Yeah, I suppose Thor
yeah.
needs to be me after my midlife crisis without actually doing the midlife crisis.
Exactly. Like I took thousands of years, arguably, and I'm going to give Thor an afternoon.
Yeah,
you know, that sort of thing. But I mean, he's. I don't actually know about it. Is he prescient, omniscient? He certainly has.
Far-seeing, I think, is probably
far-seeing. Yeah.
He's certainly not omniscient.
So, but he probably does know that he needs to get Thor ready for bad things that are to come.
Sure. Well, he knows that at some point he's going to die, and then Hela's coming back.
Yeah, the whole thing about Odin dying is kind of strange to me anyway.
Can we also, slight diversion, what is the Odin sleep, and why does it only happen in one film?
Yeah, I know. It's so
Like,
strange. I feel Odin dies about 3 times, doesn't he, throughout the whole thing?
Just about, yeah.
Because even at the end,
Wait,
when he's like dead, he still appears to Loki and Thor seemingly kind of all right, and then he disappears again.
it's and then he reappears to Thor again, and he's Odin is a weird bloke.
Odin is a weird bloke. I think that sums it up very astutely. No, but you're right. Like he had a long time to arguably become a better person.
Yeah,
I would challenge that he was a bad person. You know, he was just a king trying to protect his people and trying to expand his territory. Like, it's not that
best
unusual.
defense is a good offense. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know, he saw that there were 9 kingdoms, and he thought he was the best to rule them all. And you know, some would argue that he probably was.
Yeah, and chief amongst them him.
Yeah, that's all that matters, really.
I want to come back to Hela quickly as well, because I understand what you're saying, that essentially she's a powerful Asgardian, and that's why she can pick up the hammer. But I don't know, that doesn't feel like enough to me. Like there's and I think this comes back to Taika Waititi just having a completely different idea of how he wanted the film to work than anyone else. And that's absolutely fine. But unless what actually happens is when Hela returns, she, as essentially Odin's firstborn, actually takes on most of the power of the Allfather. Like that, or that power is essentially in limbo and available to be grabbed by whoever grabs it.
Oh, you're getting so dangerously close to a mantle argument here.
No, I'm not. Because we see neither of them actually change. The power doesn't change either, but it's there for the taking, essentially. And because Helen knows and she's prepared for Odin's death for like thousands of years, because she's had nothing else to do except murder Valkyrie.
Quite. And I think, yeah, I mean, the question of what happens to Asgardian power post death is a probably doesn't bear thinking about, because you'd think someone like the All-Father dying is probably quite bad news all round.
It sounds bad.
Yeah, and doesn't he actually die in Ragnarok? Well, I guess he does die in
no, but you're right. It's different. He's slain by Fenris Wolf, isn't he?
I honestly don't remember.
He does die in Ragnarok, but he dies as part of Ragnarok.
You mean in the Poetic Edda, or you mean in the film now?
No, in the Edda. Yeah.
No, you're right. Which I mean, that whole thing is really quite interesting, because I never really stopped to think what that means, but it probably does suggest that Thor is on his way out, because he dies in Ragnarok, doesn't he?
He does. He's killed by Jormungandr.
Yeah, whom we haven't met. I don't
think,
have we?
We haven't. The Great Serpent. No. And also the Fenris Wolf in Thor Ragnarok is quite disappointing and just gets beaten up by the Hulk.
Yeah, but I mean, the Hulk is pretty...
Yeah, no, sure. But and then Surtur destroys Asgard, which is what happens in Ragnarok. In the
and presumably kills Hela, although I guess that's...
we assume. But she also draws her power from Asgard, right? So even if she's
from the actual planet, if there's a planet.
I think so, because she gets stronger the longer she's there.
Yeah, but she was locked away in the underworld for so long, and is still pretty damn strong.
Strong enough to destroy the
Yeah, like what happens to her when she dies? Because doesn't she just go back to her own domain? It's a bit like killing Hades or Lucifer, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, my head is in my hands as I try and work out what
I can
happens.
actually tell. I can picture you just in despair.
I really regret bringing up this topic. We could have done something much easier.
Well, but I think we've made good progress. I think we're actually saying, or at least I'm saying, and frankly, I don't necessarily care what you think, that yeah, the hammer is just a hammer, except with that one time when Odin imbued it with Thor's essence. After that, the hammer is just a hammer that, I mean, it's a little discerning as a hammer, but I don't think it would confer anything special onto the people who wield it.
No, that's correct.
Or at least not. Not at the expense of Thor, but that's not quite right. That's not what I mean. Like maybe it would allow you to tap into
become
Thor's.
Thor. No,
No, but it might allow you to sort of tap into Thor's being a little bit.
but Thor being Thor doesn't seem to tire Thor out. That's a lot of Thoring.
It doesn't seem to tire Thor out now.
Like when he and Hela are fighting, and he's like, I believe his quote is, "I just hit her with the biggest blast of lightning in the history of blasts of lightning." Like, he doesn't seem to bother him. He's like, it's just not doing anything.
No, he's never tired. Even when he's a really fat bloke, he doesn't seem to tire.
How is fat Thor worthy? Well, I guess we decided he isn't. He doesn't need to be.
Well,
Then how can he summon?
he is
How can
because in his eyes he failed his one mission, right? He failed to protect his people.
Yeah, but
And he blamed
failing. His people still exist. Not all of them. Granted, like half of them died, but like he's not doing his duty again. That was the whole problem in the first film, was that he wasn't doing his duty. He was putting his own. He was putting his own needs. Rephrase. He was putting his own needs ahead of the needs of his people, which he's doing again.
I don't think so, because he's not putting anyone's needs anywhere.
No, he's putting his own.
And
his people need him.
But we also don't see him do anything Thor-like or even wield a hammer or Stormbreaker until he gets his act together again.
That's not quite true. No, we see him. He summons the hammer during the conversation with his mum, or just after the conversation with his mum. I guess you could argue that that's when he makes a decision to be himself.
Yeah, exactly. That's when he changes his mind again. Possibly. And there's also an argument made for the hammer being confused, because, there's probably two Thors around at that point.
You got to feel sorry for Thor number 1, whose hammer goes missing on the day that the Dark Elves turn up and his mum gets murdered.
Yeah, but the hammer turns up. The hammer never goes missing.
That's the argument, isn't it? It's a good job Thor wasn't holding the hammer.
I don't know. Could have brought another Thor back with him. That would have been great.
That would have been handy.
God.
Oh. Right.
No,
so,
but I think I do think the hammer confers some sort of power, or it acts as a conduit for Thor. Because I'm just thinking back, as you do see Cap sort of throw lightning around with it, not to the same extent Thor does, and I think it does look like it's very much bound to the hammer specifically.
But if you think about Ragnarok as well, that was all about Thor coming to grips with his power, and before that, we never see Thor use his power without his hammer. So it might be that, like, you're right, but Cap could do what Thor can do, but he's not learned to, because it took Thor thousands of years to learn.
Are you suggesting Cap is the god of thunder?
No, but if the power allows you, if the hammer allows you to, as you put it, tap into Thor's power, then what I'm saying is that it might be that he could learn to do that if he had enough, that Cap could learn to throw lightning bolts.
Oh no, I think I disagree with you there. I don't think he could.
Okay.
Even wielding Mjolnir. I've got no evidence to back that up.
No, I mean I've got no evidence in favour. This is just what. Yeah, this is just from where we think the films have gone.
It's a really interesting. It's a really interesting question. Is in the actual mythology, is Mjolnir like this?
No,
It's just a hammer. Well, I mean, just a hammer. It's
Thor's
hammer, but
it's
it's
Thor's
not.
hammer, and it's made by Svartalfs as part of a competition.
Yeah.
And that also makes like a magic arm ring for Odin and a boat for Frey, I think. And it's a competition that, and it's when Loki gets his lips sewn together. You
Oh
remember?
right, yeah. Do they also make the cloak that Loki has? Is that a thing? I don't know. My Norse mythology is so
Mine is very
haphazard.
patchy.
Catchy.
I know
Oh,
some of
patchy.
it quite well, and some of it not at all. But no, so this is, I can't remember the genesis of the competition, but it turns into a competition between two essentially clans of dwarves for who's the
Yeah.
greater craftsman, and one of them says if I win, I want Loki's head, and the Allfather says yeah, fine, and then that guy makes, amongst other things, Mjolnir, but Loki interferes, which is why Mjolnir has such a short handle. Like its shape is wrong for a warhammer because Loki
Yeah,
interferes.
it's just a giant mallet, really, isn't it?
It's just yeah, exactly. Rather than a warhammer, but the gods still decide that is the best thing, and so the dwarf turns to take Loki's head, and Loki says, "You can have my head, but you never said anything about my neck, and you can't."
Yeah.
You can't take my head without harming my neck. So the dwarf sews Loki's lips shut.
Loki is a bit of a douche. He's also
Yeah.
great. He's also great. Okay, now
Absolutely.
I've got two more quandaries for you.
Okay.
Jane Foster.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna. I knew we were gonna get there because that's going to be Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah, which is a wild film title. I think it's going to
I'm
be a wild
so
film.
up for that film.
Because I
It's going to be
imagine the
so
Guardians
good.
are in that.
It's just going to
bloody
be.
Russell Crowe is in it.
Wait, what? Russell Crowe's in Love and Thunder?
Didn't he spoil that when he got drunk in Australia?
But to be
I think
fair,
he even says who he plays in it. He plays Zeus, I think, which is
wait,
all kinds of
what?
weird. Yeah.
All right, I'm looking this up.
Yeah, I think he plays Zeus.
I'm so, please.
Which, I mean, if that's a mad crossover.
It looks like Zeus. Oh no, that's just his Jor-El costume.
I mean, I'm looking forward to that film.
He
I
is
think
playing.
it's Taika Waititi again, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Taika Waititi playing, and he's playing. Is it right? Yeah, he's playing Zeus.
Yeah, that's going to be
What?
excellent. That's going to be excellent. So I guess we'll find out if Jane can pick up the hammer before she becomes Thor. If the hammer makes her become Thor. If Thor has to do an Odin and imbue the hammer with his power before Jane can become Thor, or if Jane's just a bit like Cap in some way.
That would also that would massively like devalue Cap. I feel because I like Jane, but she's not Cap levels of self-sacrificing.
Well, no, but I guess we haven't really given her the chance to do that yet, have we?
No, I suppose.
I mean, all she does is she does. She's obviously a very highly trained physicist, but yeah, in film one, we just get to see her be really geeky and excited about the physics of it all. And then in the second film, I mean, Thor 2 is just, yeah.
I don't like talking about it.
Yeah, I know why. It's just so meh.
Do you know my most hated scene in Thor 2?
What's that?
It's the tube scene.
The tube scene.
Thor gets on the tube and asks how you get to Greenwich.
Oh, yeah.
and the directions that the woman on the tube gives him are wrong.
Yeah.
And it makes me so angry.
Yeah. That whole film is just so bad. Especially because they make Malekith seem so strong, but then he does nothing.
Yeah, it just makes no sense.
It's strange. So I mean, let's move on. So because my last question was going to be, because I mean, I think we'll see what happens with Jane, and odds are
we're gonna need to do a review of that film when it comes out.
Absolutely. I kind of hope she wields Stormbreaker, because that thing is about as big as she is, I think.
That'd be really funny. I also want Fat Thor for the rest of the MCU.
Oh, he's so disturbing.
I don't ever want him to lose that weight.
Because it's so clearly Chris Hemsworth in a fat suit, and my brain just can't get past that.
But it doesn't matter. Actually, what I really, really liked about Endgame, I know you've got a last point, but is when he like suits up at the very end, when it's him, Tony Stark, and Cap, and he doesn't lose the weight.
I know,
because it would have been so easy to unfat suit Chris Hemsworth.
Exactly, just to be like, "Oh, I'm Thor, by the way." You know,
I'm still me, but no, you drank that weight on. You're gonna
exactly. Although one imagines that he burns about 1 million calories by just breathing. So
yeah, you gotta wonder what he was doing. Sorry. What's your final point?
My final question is: what about the Valkyrie, whose name I forget? What do we think she can do in terms of holding the hammer?
I think there's a long list of people that you could ask that question about.
But she is now the Queen of Asgard, right? Of New Asgard, I guess.
Yes, that's true, because Thor's gone off guardianing.
Shirking his duties. Well, I guess he makes the right decision by putting someone more capable in charge. I mean, that's fair.
I think there's a long list of should this person be able to wield it? Like Peter Parker, he's a pretty good guy.
Oh, he's nothing but insecure, though.
I suppose.
Maybe when he's older.
But he's full of self-doubt, which feels like a good trait in a hero.
Maybe when he's older.
I'm going to say for Valkyrie, no, she can't wield it.
Ooh, I don't know about that.
Because I think there's a distinction between sitting in the throne and being like the new Odin. Like if Thor comes back and says, "Actually, you're in my seat," she's going to get out of the seat and he's going to get back into it. Thor's still in charge. She's essentially like a regent with a crown on.
Possibly.
I think.
Possibly, but she's had a good character arc. She was in a dark place. She's turned it around. Yeah.
Is there any scenario in which Loki could have wielded it?
Possibly still can.
Maybe we'll find out in Loki's new TV series.
Because he's definitely not dead.
I didn't need that. You got too close to your microphone there.
Oh, that was entirely on purpose. Don't you worry.
Wait, you mean OG Loki isn't dead?
I mean, OG Loki isn't dead. Yeah.
We definitely saw. I can't believe I'm going to say this. We definitely saw him die.
No, we didn't.
We saw
him go blue. Yeah. So
he didn't go blue. He went a sort of horrible purple color.
Yeah, well, but I can't remember if his kin are blue or purpley. Kind of both, aren't they?
He didn't go frost giant colored, if that's what you mean.
I don't know. I think Loki isn't dead.
And also his corpse was on the half of the Asgardian rescue spaceship thing that Thanos definitely broke.
The guy can teleport and magic away.
He can't teleport that far.
You don't know that. Loki is still alive. You can give me tinfoil for that next week if you so choose. But I swear to God, if it turns out that he is alive, I will give you tinfoil for life.
Honestly, having 1 week where I don't have to wear this stupid hat is going to be really, really nice.
It just suits you so well.
made to measure at this stage.
I mean, strangely enough, I think we've actually been relatively sensible this episode. I haven't called you an idiot, I don't think.
There's not been much to sort of wonder. I think it's been almost too hard to unpick, really. But I think we have got to some sort of a conclusion. I think.
What is the conclusion? Do you want to sum up what we've actually got here?
I'll try to. So I think where we've got to is that the hammer itself is not inherently conferring any more Thor's power, or indeed really any power. It may, although this is unclear, allow access to Thor's power, but that doesn't seem to be supported by enough evidence. And while the hammer may be gauging some form of worth, whosoever holds this hammer has been turned off after Thor picked it up in Thor 1. I think that's basically where we got to.
Yeah. I think
Easy.
that's right, yeah.
Easy. What were we worrying about?
Well, I wasn't worried whatsoever. But,
just me then.
I could tell that you were having a bit of an existential crisis over this one. So
I was
glad that we discussed
flapping.
This.
I was flapping quite badly.
It's quite a heavy episode, this one. But I guess we've had lots of rage recently. I'm still not quite over that. So it's good. It's good that we're here and just talking philosophy, talking pseudoscience, which is
I enjoy these deep dives into completely unnecessary
deep dives, and hopefully someone out there listening to this podcast, though why you would be doing that, I don't know. No, please keep listening, please.
Please.
But also tell us if you know how Mjolnir works. If you're Odin or indeed Thor, then please let us know.
Or if this is covered in the comics, if there's just a simple one-line answer, don't make me go and read 100 comics. I'm not going to do it. But if there's just a simple episode XYZ says this and that's why, again, let us know. We'll be excited to hear.
Or if Natalie Portman or indeed Chris Hemsworth wants to give me a call to explain, feel free.
I'll leave my Zoom details in the...
I will take any call at any time. But anyway, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Expertise is Overrated. No doubt we've said some things that were either objectively wrong or downright offensive. As we said, feel free to let us know, put Sean out of his misery, rate the podcast, and leave us a comment or drop us an email at expertisesoverrated@gmail.com, or tweet us at zeroexpertise, or check out our website, expertisesoverrated.podbean.com.
If you're lucky, we might just argue with you in one of our upcoming episodes, and if you're really lucky, we might call you an idiot. Now, in the next episode, we're going to mark our 10th installation of the podcast by taking a step away from our usual overanalyzing of sci-fi and fantasy to ask a slightly more meta question: is early access good for the video games industry? Join us then for more nonsense.